Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jeff Bradbury Show. My name is Jeff Bradbury, and on today's episode, we have a fantastic guest talking all about how do you build your business, how do you build your brand, and it is certainly an episode that you're going to want to stay until the very end for. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this is the first time you're enjoying one of our shows, my name is Jeff Bradbury. I've been in education for the last 20 years, and I very much love sharing stories of people who are passionate about what they do. You can find all the information about the show over on teachercast.net/podcast, where in addition to the Jeff Bradbury Show, you can find all of the episodes of Digital Learning Today and our instructional coaching show, Ask the Tech Coach, where for the last 13 years, we've been bringing you guys the best in educational professional development. I am excited to have my guest on the show today. Not only has he been revolutionizing how businesses navigate changes in this current environment, but he's also has a mission to help innovators, businesses, and investors do something what he calls innovate with confidence. He's here today to talk to you, the educator, all about how to take your idea, that thing that you are passionate about outside of that classroom, and turn it into a reality. I'm pleased to bring on today Mr. Jeff Holman. Jeff, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. And I really do love helping people innovate with confidence. It's this the mission I've adopted for, I don't know, the last 10 or 12 years. So thanks for having me.
Well, let's start right there and talk about that. You know, so many people who are listening to the show are educators. Over the last many years, I've had an opportunity to work with educators who are saying, I have an idea. How do you start? How do you get it? I don't know if it's for me. They want to take that step, but they're afraid because, you know, classroom is something that's secure. We just covered a lot of stuff in there, I understand. But what do you mean when you say innovate with confidence? What does that actually mean to you?
I mean, for me, it's really, I go back to, this is silly maybe, but G.I. Joe when I was younger, right? Knowing is half the battle, I think is what the phrase was. And there's so much in the law that you just don't quite know. You know, you hear about A, B, C, D, you hear all these options, and you're like, but which one applies to me? And so the first thing is just, I don't think hearing the options is really the obstacle for most people. It's knowing if there are 5 options, how do I know how to pick for one of them for my situation? So it's really just getting people pointed in the right direction, saying, you know what, from a legal perspective, based on the information I know, here are the 6 steps I would take to move forward. And that just empowers people, to be honest.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about how do you take your idea and make it a reality. I can easily remember 13 years ago, sitting in my basement, coming up with this concept of TeacherCast and starting my first podcast. I took a website, I took a Twitter account, and next thing you know, I turn around, I'm working for Microsoft. I'm building things out for multiple companies. And I always started with, how did I get here? I know personally, I didn't expect this to turn into a business. This was a fun thing. But here we are in a creator economy. People are starting YouTube channels looking to be millionaires. Teachers are taking this little concept of building tutorials and building out little PDFs. And now they're making hundreds of thousands, trying to, on sites that make it easy just to start things up and to start selling their goods. Let's start there. If a teacher has an idea, has a concept, at what point should they be thinking about taking that to that next level? Let's say that they do have an Etsy store or a Teachers Pay Teacher store. They're doing some stuff on YouTube. When does an idea become a business?
Oh, that's a great idea, or a great question. So I always, and I don't want to complicate this, I kind of think of this in three phases, right? There's the how to validate your business, right? Validate your market, and then how to give yourself freedom to operate. And the legal stuff all falls into freedom to operate, right? So make sure that you aren't infringing somebody's trademark, make sure that you have an LLC to protect you. And we can kind of dive into those. But a lot of people start with that LLC. And so they'll sell, you know, they create a digital asset, a PDF, like you mentioned, and they'll start selling it. And then they'll see, oh, people really like this. Like I've tried 6 or 7 iterations and this one, I've nailed it, right? It starts to take off. And so you start making money, and then you realize, wait, I'm making enough money. I probably should figure out if I need a company around this. And so that's really kind of the spark that a lot of people run into, is they find a little bit of success, or in other words, as I say it, they validate that their product works, and that the market wants that product. And then they realize, well, let's look into starting a company around this. maybe really tracking those expenses, maybe giving myself some liability protection in case I need it. And so they start going down that LLC track usually.
Do you find that people don't take that step quickly enough? They turn around and they're making $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. And, that's a lot of product. That's a lot of PDFs sometimes for educators to be making, or they're in the consulting business and they realize that they've been consulting for like 3 or 4 or 5 years. And they're going, well, should I become an LLC? Should I make this? At what point should we be having these conversations with ourselves? And most importantly, I think with our families going, do I want to go down this route, or is this not for me? And what are those questions we should be asking ourselves when thinking about this?
Well, first off, having an LLC is usually a very simple task to set one up, right? It's not a very complicated process in most states. And so you would be able to do that oftentimes. Now you can do it on your own. There are pluses and minuses to that, but a lot of times people will start out and they'll just get onto their state Secretary of Commerce or Division of Commerce website, and they'll just file for an LLC. It might cost them $100, $200, and they get that going. I think there's kind of 2 questions here I would look at. On the legal side, do you want liability protection? Now, if you're just selling a PDF, it's got, I don't know, math questions or something, right? Like whatever that might be, like you don't necessarily need a lot of liability protection because the likelihood of getting sued over that is probably very low, as opposed to say, you're buying real estate and somebody could slip and fall on a rental unit, or you're launching a product and there's perhaps product liability issues related to your product. So a PDF is a pretty benign way to launch a business. So there's how much liability do you want? And then the other side of that is it branches over into the financial side, right? How do you want to track your expenses? How do you want to account for your income? And oftentimes people will file for an LLC because they can get, when you start making enough money, you can kind of leverage the financial side of it, which is not particularly a legal question, but it's tied together with that legal question.
I remember my first LLC in a different state that I lived in. I did exactly how you put it. Went online, filled out some things, and next thing you know, I'm a company. And that was a long night with a friend of mine trying to figure out how to make all this work. And when I changed states, I said, okay, enough of this. And at that point in time, I had legal representation helping me out with, the business side. Here, you do it. You close it on this state. You open it up on this state. Do you have any advice on what this should be, naming it? And I know a lot of teachers out there are saying, and I'll just use myself as the example. Do I name it Jeff LLC? Do I name it TeacherCast? Like, is there any recommendations for naming it after the brand, naming it after the person? Which do you prefer? And again, I think we should probably say this is not legal advice, yada, yada, right? Like this is just a podcast we're having a conversation on, but coming up with your business names and stuff like that, what are some of the things we need to be worrying about?
Let me get to that in one moment, because you said something else that I think is worth pausing on. And that is you talked about, you talked about converting your LLC from one state to another. That's kind of an administrative task. The other thing you mentioned that caught my ear is that you stayed up late talking to a friend. If you were starting a business with a friend, if there's more than one of you, right? You're not a single member LLC, you're a multi-member LLC. Then I would say you really, really want to get an operating agreement in place. So we can talk about the naming in a second, but it's an excellent point you brought up, because once you get another person involved, you have other expectations, maybe 2 people who don't quite know what to expect, but we all know that everybody going into that has expectations, even if they're unspoken. So at that point, the thing that many people will miss when they go into their state division of corporations is they will just put together the templated version of articles of organization that are available, and they'll fill in their names and addresses and registered agent. Maybe one of them is a registered agent, and then they'll leave it at that because they don't realize that there's another step. It's not necessarily required for your registration in most states, but as a team of founders, I consider it legally required because you want to drop your divorce papers before you ever think about divorce. So that's your operating agreement. You really, really, really want to have an operating agreement in place so that the two of you or the multiple founders that are working on something together can just talk about what the expectations are going forward. So maybe that was a little bit off on a tangent, but
that was good. I know a lot of podcasters who are doing the 2-person podcast, and they're like, let's build this as a business. You need to have those conversations.
Yeah, it goes well until it doesn't go well, right? And then that's when the legal stuff seems to surface, is when things haven't gone as one or both parties expect. So operating agreement, remember those words. That's a key takeaway here, I think, for anybody starting an LLC for their startup business. Now, you asked about naming a company. It's a great question. We do a ton of trademark work. Trademarks, of course, protect the branding assets that you build, right? The names, logos, taglines, maybe colors, things like that. So we do a lot of work with people because of our expertise in the trademark side of things. As far as your business name goes, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but the name of the business oftentimes doesn't matter at all. Right. What matters is what you choose to use as the branding for your business. Now, if you choose to brand your business with the name, then your name is really important. But a lot of people don't do that. They'll start their LLC and they'll call it the Jeff Bradbury LLC or whatever. And as long as that name isn't identical to another name in the state registry, you can probably register it. You could call it, the Bradco Holding Company or Bradbury Enterprises or whatever you want. A lot of people will do that. And it really doesn't matter much. What matters a ton, especially for the long-term value of your business, is what you choose to brand your business with. And so that might be, for a product-based company, your product branding might be the most important thing to think about, to really give consideration to how you brand and market that one product or that group of products. Some people get to the point where they have a trade name that they'll use, and it might be the same as their business name, or it might be different, right? For example, my law firm is called Intellectual Strategies. That's actually a DBA. That's how I chose to brand my law firm and my team. The actual name of my company is because I've had my law firm in some form or fashion for like 20 years, I think. And it's actually called Holman Technologies LLC. It has nothing to do with anything that I brand anywhere on the internet. You're one of a few people I have ever even told that to, because it doesn't matter, right? But Intellectual Strategies is the trade name we've chosen, and that's how we brand it. So that might be the long answer to say how you choose your company name probably doesn't matter. You can choose it to be whatever you want. What really matters is the public facing version of the brand that you're using for your product and your service, perhaps long term.
For those who are new to this and are listening to this episode because these are lots of the questions that they have, what are some of the advantages that somebody can take advantage of for having an LLC? You had already mentioned some of the tax things that happen. Why does somebody want to have an LLC? Pretend maybe that they're consulting or they're starting to get paid to do speaking engagements or anything like that. What can they take advantage of? I know for myself, anything with a microphone I can write off. Like, what are some examples of that?
Yeah, that's the big one. It's mostly financial in some form or another, right? It's about what you can write off. It's about how you pay yourself. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about, oh, I have an S corp or an LLC, and technically, most people who say they have an S corp, oftentimes I find have an LLC with a tax election, an S election for their taxes, which they then call an S corp for shorthand. But an S corp is usually just it's a tax election, not a type of entity. So a lot of it comes down to how you write off your expenses. It comes down to which you can do some of that, without an LLC, but it's a lot harder to track. And I think your tax advisor would probably tell you that there's more red flags if you don't have an entity behind you. So writing off expenses, how you pay yourself, and I'm not a tax advisor, and this is not tax advice, but a lot of people will go do an S election with their LLC so that they can pay themselves what you consider a reasonable salary, and then distribute out profits. And the profits don't have all the same payroll type taxes that you would pay if you paid yourself just a straight wage. So wages versus profit distributions on the payment side of things. And then the other financial thing that we kind of wrap into legal is protection against potential liabilities. So, if you're launching a business and you're interacting with companies and you think there might be some potential liability there, or you're interacting with customers directly and you think, hey, I might get sued someday for something. And we all know that here in the US, it's a great place to live and a great place to sue people, because you can sue them for whatever you want with no basis whatsoever sometimes. And I say that tongue in cheek in case that dry humor didn't come across. But so if you think you have any exposure whatsoever, then, an LLC can really protect you against that. If you're taking out loans from a bank, an LLC might be able to protect you. Although a bank they're smart enough to put personal guarantees in place typically. So there's the financial protections through the kind of the legal entity structure. And that's where, you don't necessarily realize how many ways people are going to come up with suing you once you become successful. And again, none of this matters on day one, but I've got a lot of clients who, they launch their business, they start selling, they might sell a couple $100,000 a month, which we could all just dream to do that, right? As a solo business. As soon as somebody else sees you as a successful entrepreneur, there will be people that come out of nowhere and they're like, oh, your website is not ADA compliant and I'm going to sue you for violation because I'm in, wherever. And I tried to access your website and the button to purchase your PDF wasn't working. And I know it's only a, $9.99 PDF, but this is a violation of, Americans with Disabilities Act because your website wasn't working when I tried to purchase. And therefore you're going to end up settling that case with somebody for $10,000 or $15,000. Like it's kind of crazy. An LLC doesn't get you out of that, but an LLC, if something goes haywire, we'll call it, something goes really wrong and you need to shut down your business at some point, you can do that. And the liabilities for the most part, unless you've agreed otherwise, like with a bank, the liabilities stay with the business, not with you personally. And that's, at small stakes, it doesn't seem like a big thing, but once your company goes very successful, you have a lot more exposure than you probably would think. So
I want everybody to hit the rewind button on that answer right there, because that is absolutely one of the two things that we all need to worry about, whether we're selling digital products, whether we're going into conferences. People always ask, what are the two things that they should be thinking about when they're getting into consulting or going out to speak? And I'd say the first is make sure you have that LLC, because then you can do things like write off your plane tickets. The second, get some insurance. I know I've had many gigs, if you will, that say, we can't hire you unless you have this specialized insurance. And it's usually not a lot of money, but just having it and having the ability to be able to walk into school buildings and other places, knowing that you are covered both on the business side and on the insurance side. I think those are two things that everybody needs to be looking into. Just real quick, because I know this isn't the major topic, any advice on finding insurance as a small business or as an individual consultant?
In my experience, you just got to find a broker who's familiar with your industry. So if you're out there selling, software perhaps to a school district, or you're selling services to a school district, you want to find somebody who's familiar with that. I've seen instances of clients getting insurance where they thought they were covered, and when it came down to it, the insurance, they'll take their sweet time and they will tell you whether or not you're covered after the fact. So you want to get somebody who you can really rely on, that is familiar with your space. You probably don't want to go to the same person that you said, hey, I found I found car insurance somewhere online, and they said that they can insure my business. And you make a really good point, because when you start getting into contractual situations with clients, especially sophisticated clients or larger clients like school districts, they're going to have a ton of requirements. Insurance is one of those. Another one that they're going to say is you have to, there's going to be certain indemnification provisions. And what that really means is, between the two of you, you'll resolve your disputes, right? But if there's a third party who comes in and says that they were injured, and they go after your client, if you've indemnified them, your client's going to turn to you and say, well, you need to take care of this, because in our contract, you agreed to be responsible for this third party liability that I incurred because I worked with you. So they're going to require that. So this is really where we spend an imbalanced amount of time as attorneys negotiating indemnification clauses on contracts when the likelihood of something happening is very remote, but the dollar amounts involved if something does happen become very substantial.
I remember one of my first major contracts with the school district was for doing a website, and they would not let me start the project, have the contract, unless I had insurance, just in case I fell and broke my arm. And I kept saying to them, but I'm sitting at my house. And they said, that doesn't matter. Like, you need to have all of these things in place before you're an official vendor. And I said, and it was like $200 or something. Like, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was just like, okay, but I'm only getting paid like 800. Which is one of those, like, okay, here we go for this.
Yeah, but you're going to want a general liability insurance policy. It's going to be, like you said, a few $100, depending on the type of business you are. It's slip and fall type coverage. If you're a real business, you're going to want that anyways. It gives you a layer of protection in addition to, the layer we talked about with the LLC. But you might need more specialized insurance too. There's a lot of different types of insurance. I've got some clients who have product liability insurance because the types of products they sell could potentially harm people. So, and in fact, these days, it's probably becoming a big thing in the education space, and that's data privacy, right? Mm-hmm. Protecting personal information that you might gain access to, and complying with the data security and privacy protocols of the districts. So it's just if that fails, which we see it all the time, right? You need to have something in place, because it very well could be a mortality incident for your business if you don't have it.
I would love to welcome you back on the show, Jeff, to do an hour and a half on data privacy and get a bunch of tech directors on and just have that conversation. I mean, these are things that we talk about in the hallways of conferences, but nobody ever sits down and explains to people, this is the way that it looks like from the school district point of view. This is the way that it looks like from the teacher's point of view, from the legal point of view. And then, everybody listening to this knows I'm raising 3 11-year-olds. They need to understand how all of this works. You turn around and they're on their Chromebooks and they're giving out different passwords. I'm like, that is a huge conversation. And if you guys would love to see Jeff come back on and talk about that, let us know. Head on over to teachercast.net/contact. Would love to hear from you guys. And if you have any questions for Jeff, would love to have you guys find out more. The link is going to be in the description of this show. Talking today to Jeff Holman all about his journey from being an engineer to the entrepreneur that he is. Talk to us a little bit about how you guys started. What were you doing as an engineer? What was that early career like? And how did you find a way to make that transition?
Oh, man. Haphazard is probably the best word for it sometimes. But no, I actually really loved, through school, I loved the science, loved the engineering, and knew I wanted to get into that. But I kind of, if for some strange reason, also knew I wanted to go beyond that. So I had this idea of going into business, becoming an entrepreneur. So I worked a couple of years after electrical engineering. I was doing that. We call it power and lighting. It's the least sexy version of engineering. It's taking, big hospitals and making sure power gets to all the plugs. I did work on some fancy homes. We mentioned before the show that I live here in Utah. And I helped design some 25, 30,000 square foot private residences at some of the ski resorts with fancy lighting design everywhere for their artwork. So there's some of that, but I did that for a few years. And honestly, I was going to go to get an MBA, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, have you thought about being a patent attorney? because that engineering background and the law, it's a great combination. It's in high demand at the time, this was such a long time ago. But yeah, so I kind of it just intrigued me, and I ended up going down that path and finding another buddy locally that was working in patent law, and just connected up with him. And so I've been doing patent law, I don't know, since late 2001. And I did eventually go back and get my MBA also, because I just have that bug that, I tell people there's a chaos with working with small startups and innovators and entrepreneurs that it just draws me in, right? It's a great place to be, and there's a great energy about it, even though it is chaotic most of the time.
How has this environment changed? You had mentioned you've been doing this for 20 years. With the, technology is constantly moving around, things are happening, pandemic, administrations are changing in DC. What has all of that done to this system of becoming a business owner, becoming an entrepreneur, understanding how things work, becoming successful? What have you seen as a big change over the last 20 years?
I mean, so I spent 15 years doing pretty heavy patent stuff. The last 8 or 10 years, I've been more general business, but it surprised me in the patent world. I mean, patents have been around for a few hundred years, right? Prior to 2013, the last major change in the patent system was like in the 1950s. And yet there's been such a swing from one extreme to the other, just in the patent world, about what is patentable. Starting with, I became a patent agent, they call it, prior to graduating law school. And that was right after the one-click patent with Amazon, if you remember that, which is kind of the foundation of software patents and software, just the explosion of software and the SaaS business model that's evolved out of, the disks that we used to buy and install on our own computers. So there's just been so much shifting and changing in a regulatory manner with patents that it's really opened my eyes up that this is we're working in a live system here, right? Things are moving, and we see it in politics, we see it in the statutes and the regulations, and then we see it with the evolution of technology. AI is not going to replace me anytime soon, but it is going to change the way all of us work, 100%. So that's an exciting, boy, I want to use a phrase, new frontier. Is that the Star Trek phrase? Don't confuse me for a Trekkie, because I couldn't claim or pretend to be one, but it really is a new frontier for everything. And legal, I was talking to somebody today, legal and finance are some of the most traditional fields. They don't move the same way and the same speed as these other fields. And yet AI is going to disrupt us as much or more than anyone else, I believe. So
in what ways do you see AI already disrupting your business?
I mean, the way that we integrate it into it, we use it a lot for brainstorming. Now, there are probably 1,000 ways we could be using it, but we use it for just working through ideas and generating some marketing content and kind of mulling through options for clients. It's a terrible system if you want facts and truth, which we really need as attorneys, but it's a fantastic system for just sourcing large amounts of data and aggregating things together. So we use that a lot. Another maybe fun way that we're getting involved in it is I've got a client that came on board recently, and ironically, you would think, well, maybe we don't want to work for them because they're perhaps going to displace us. They want to write patents using mainly AI, and that takes our patent clients and says, well, they're probably going after some of the same clients that we're already working for. But as we talk, these types of businesses recognize that they don't have 100% solution. They have like a 40% solution, right? So they've come back to us and said, hey, while we're kind of perfecting our system, we'd love to have some expert oversight as to what's going on. And so we're going to do all this front end work. We're going to sell this product and this service to clients, but in the background, can you help us make sure it's good? Right. And so it becomes another source of revenue for us, but more importantly, we get to be there and kind of work hand in hand with the tech guys who are trying to create and roll out the AI that, eventually we might find ways to just incorporate really seamlessly into our business. So
you've had the opportunity.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's such a moving, chaotic space right now.
You've had the opportunity over the last 20 plus years to not only grow your business, build your business, but also help so many other companies grow their brands and grow their businesses. I got to ask you one of my favorite questions here. What's been your biggest teachable moment? What's the one thing or the couple things that you've just learned and take with you that you're always just reverting back to?
Oh, wow. I might need to take a minute on that. I do think I might have a couple. Let me start with this one though, and I'm going to go back to the slogan or the tagline that I've adopted, which is Innovate with Confidence. When I first started out, I was working with some companies who were servicing, clients like IBM and Intel, and they were just writing, mass patents. So not large patents, but lots and lots of patents. And IBM for so many years has been, and maybe still is, I think they might have lost their first place status as the number one patent filer and patent grantee in the nation. There was like a 40-year streak because that was what was important to them. But on my end, being there helping, as interesting as it was, helping a company like IBM put a few dozen more patents in their portfolio, like there's just not a whole lot of fulfillment there. And so that's one of the reasons I transitioned, right, between from the way I worked with large corporations into exclusively working with startups and small companies. It's just, there's an energy, there's the ability to make a difference. We're working with dreamers. We're working with creators, people who are actually creating something out of nothing. Do you know what I mean? I know you know what I mean, but right? You go one day and you're like, there's probably a better way to do this. Like that's the phrase that we hear, yep. Right? Yeah. I bet there's a better way to do this. And you go and you sit down at your computer and you use AI or whatever, and all of a sudden you're selling something new that didn't exist. And you might downplay it and be like, well, it's just a little bit better way to do this. Yeah, but people came there to buy it because it's good. It's better enough that it's making a difference. And so that's who we work with all the time. And so when I say, and this started with me before I had a team, my objective was to help people innovate with confidence. Like I want to see people go in and I want to see them crush it. And I want to see them feel like good and have some, I wish I had a synonym for it, but I want to see them have confidence as they're going through this process and they're launching something new that never existed before and that the world is loving. So that's a lot of what drives me. So I'll leave it at that for teachable. That's I think one of the biggest takeaways, and I think it's one of the biggest ways I'm able to contribute, but also one of the biggest ways I'm able to experience the rewards of what I do. So it just fits for how I operate.
Take us through one of those. Could you, without giving away names and companies and things, share a quick story, a success story, somebody that came to you, sat across the desk and said, I have an idea, and now they're over the moon successful, and maybe a couple tips of what was that thing? We all talk about, Michael Jordan had that it factor. What is that it factor that you're looking for when you're sitting across a table from somebody who says, I have an idea?
Let me tell you two stories. One, I got an email today from somebody who we've helped them get one patent. And I wouldn't say this is like this is not yet the story of Michael Jordan, but maybe it will be. These two kids came and they said, hey, we want to get a patent on this ski product. And they have leverage that to, we've got them a patent. They came up with a cool product. It's something that they use because they're skiers. They're on their school ski team or whatever it is. And these two have kind of leveraged that to get into college as part of their application process with the college. And they've said, hey, we're inventors officially. Like we have a patent. And so to me, that's a really impactful moment personally for those two inventors. And they just emailed today, hey, we're working on something new. Like, Like, let's set up another call. So that's one. Another one on a little bit larger scale. I mentioned a group of founders earlier as we were talking. They came to me, somebody had referred me to them, and they were in the middle of, at the time, they were selling. It's a company called PillowCube. You might have heard of it. If you're a side sleeper and you're on Facebook,
I know PillowCube. Yep,
you've seen PillowCube because they make awesome commercials and they make an awesome product. I have a couple. I travel everywhere with one. Their travel cube. It says I get paid nothing for this, but buy their travel cube, pack it up, and travel with it. I've taken it around the world with me, and I'm so glad I have it. But they came to me when they were much smaller. And, it is, I don't want to downplay it because it's made a difference for so many people. But if you look at it, it's a rectangular pillow, right? And they said, hey, we're selling this thing. And there's a lot of talent behind how they create their product, how they market it, how they fulfill all that stuff. So it's a much more sophisticated business than maybe the product would seem. But, I just remember they came to me 5 years ago and they said, hey, we're selling this product, and we started it, last year or 6 months ago or whenever it was. And I'm like, oh, okay, we'll help you. I've helped a lot of clients that are doing this. And like, no. Like, we need you right now because we're selling X dollars a month of this. And I'm like, you're selling, it's a
square pillow.
How much are you selling of this? And which to me triggered a bunch of things, not just, oh, cool, they're making money, but I mentioned before, when you start to see success, people start to notice you, and then you start to get exposed to all these potential liabilities. A lot of them are opportunistic, I would say, and not really valid exposures, but people will come after you and they'll start to say, well, if you're successful, I want a piece of it because this is America. I deserve part of your success. So, or whatever. Right. So so they were doing kind of an astonishing amount of sales. And the funny thing is, as we've gotten involved, and I've been with them over the last 5 years, they've, like a lot of CPG companies, a lot of consumer product good companies that are selling on Amazon and on their Shopify stores, like they, the market is very turbulent, but the amount of scaling they've done from where they started to where they've gotten to, it's blown my mind again, right? It's like, this is pretty crazy to see companies with these products and expanding their product lines, growing, and really building an entire business out of one founder's idea to start selling what seems to be a relatively simple product. And yet, they're employing a lot. They're spending a ton on ads. They're making a lot of money. They're just finding success. And it's pretty cool to be a part of that.
Their product looks amazing. I mean, even as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the YouTube ads and all the places that they've popped up, and it is a cube, but man, they're doing a good job with it.
Yeah. And ironically, it's not technically a cube, but we can get into that. That's a whole different thing.
That is an amazing story. Say congratulations on that one. That is an amazing story on that. Jeff, first of all, thank you for coming on the show today. I would love to do another hour and a half on all of these different topics because there's just so much stuff out there. And if I could do this with tech directors and stuff, would love to continue that data privacy conversation. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you, man.
Well, first off, if you want to do that, let me know. I'm available, pretty accessible. And for anybody else who wants to reach out, I am pretty active on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, you can find me under Jeff Holman. If you find somebody who says, I build fractional legal teams, because that's a whole business model that we do that's pretty unique, that's me. And then the other place is we do for prospective clients, we'll do a free 30-minute phone call. So if someone's got an idea, there's, like we talked about, starting that LLC, they maybe have this branding question, they're trying to get trademarked or whatever, like go to our website. It's just intellectualstrategies.com, and you can sign up for a free 30-minute call. That'll be with me. I'll sit down and we'll kind of hear what chaos you're working in, hear what trouble you're creating, and what we can do to help solve or guide you along the way. So we just love talking with cool people about cool stuff they're working on.
We're going to make sure that the links to this is in our show notes over on the Jeff Bradbury Show. You can find out more information over at teachercast.net/podcast. Jeff, first of all, thank you so much for coming on today, and continued success for you and all your clients. I hope 2025 is prosperous for you guys.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you guys out there for checking out this show. If you'd like to find out more information, head on over to teachercast.net/podcast. For this and all of our shows, you can learn more about Ask the Tech Coach, the Digital Learning Today podcast, and of course, other episodes of the Jeff Bradbury Show. Hope you guys hit that like and subscribe button. Well, that wraps up this episode. On behalf of Jeff Holman and Jeff Bradbury and everybody here on TeacherCast, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.